We truly are the 1%. And that's only gotten, I guess, somewhat worse as years have gone by, where it's just a small subset of the American population that serves. And we remain isolated on these bases. They're like fortresses, right? Especially now after 9/11, where everything's so secure. There's probably a vast majority of the population that's never seen the inside of this base and has no earthly idea what happens inside here, or what the children might go through, or the families. And so there is that massive disconnect. And commanders I have seen work pretty hard at connecting that, bringing that connective tissue. But a lot of times it's just at the leader level, but where they can open the base and bring the public in, we ought to do more of that and kind of open the door and help show, the general population who we are as a military and what our life is all about. It's a two-way street. We have ownership in it, and so does, the general population, for us to get to know each other better so that we can help each other through things. Bureaucracies do their thing, which means they react the same way, regardless of conditions, right? My book is titled, It's Personal, Not Personnel. And that comes from a discussion I had with a human resource manager that was getting ready to move one of my officers in the month of February. Well, okay, it was on an Excel spreadsheet. They had a need in another location, and they had an officer with those qualifications and timeline. And so it was just a click of a button to move this officer to this new location in the month of February. Small problem. He's got a daughter who's about ready to graduate high school. Well, you can guess all of the hardship that might come of this. So my point to this personnel officer was, this is not personnel, it's personal. Okay, it's Jim or Steve, and you ought to have that conversation with them at least to say, hey, we're looking to move you in February. What does this do to you? Because I know you've got some older children here on your data sheet. And at least they could have had that conversation. Maybe the officer would have said, yeah, I can do it. Let's get this going. It works for me. Or maybe the Army could have waited until, May or June when that oldest daughter graduated high school. When you think about somebody that's stable, that stays in the same place, a student, well, the faculty gets to know that student, and all the quirks and how they learn and all that, and watch that student grow. And there's power in that, and there's beauty in that. Well, when you break that up, it's like starting over every time you go to a new school. Well, my youngest had, I wouldn't call it a learning disorder, just learned differently. He had an IEP, a specialized education program. And so that didn't transfer neatly from school to school to school. So it was somewhat reinventing the wheel or reintroducing this child to a school and ensuring that they knew that he learned differently. He wasn't dumb. He was very, very, very smart, actually. He just learned differently than other kids, and it was important for the school to recognize that. So that was challenging from school to school to school. But to say goodbye, wondering if you'll ever see him again, it's gut-wrenching. It's horrific. Those were the hardest days of my life, to have to say goodbye to my wife and my children, knowing I was going to leave and maybe not come back and see them again. We think of it in terms of the deployment itself, a 12-month deployment or a 9-month deployment or a 6-month, whatever it is, but it's longer than that. So if you look at a 12-month deployment, it's really, at least 6 months, maybe more leading up to that you're going. So it's this cloud that's following you over your head. It's that 500-pound elephant in the room. My oldest was 10 or 11 when I deployed to Iraq in 2006, and he took it very hard. It was very, very difficult. And God bless my wife, she just, put her arms around him and they got through it. And there isn't any special sauce. There's no special thing you can say. It's just about being there. I've always said that I think in many ways they have it harder back at home than we do deployed. I was certainly in more danger in a combat zone, especially as an infantry officer on the ground, than my family was. But the struggle back at home is they never knew at any given moment how much danger I was in. And that's got to be horrific, especially with all the stuff you see on TV now, because what the news channels want to show are the bombs and the bullets and the IEDs and the fallen soldiers. They don't want to show us back on a secure base, laughing and joking around, relatively, safe and secure. And that's the torture that a family has to go through when a service member is deployed in a combat zone. honor the kids that are children of military service members, and talk about the ups and downs, because there are ups. There's a lot of benefits. And then there's the struggles, and much of what we're talking about here, having to move a lot, and the combat deployments and the stress associated with that, and the scar tissue that comes from that. But I also want to talk about the positives. And one thing I discovered when, later in my career, I guess, when my boys were maturing into young men, was how grateful I was of the environment that they were in. So when you think about it, they grew up in a values-based society, the military. We had the Army values, and we subscribed to those and espoused them in everything we did. And I carried that into the household. So it sunk in, it got into their DNA. And so they were raised in a very values-based society, on a secure base, around other kids that were resilient and could deal with adversity and moves and different things like that. And so I was grateful for that. I could see that it really had a great effect on them, because they're both fine young men. Not perfect, but I attribute a lot of that certainly to my wife for staying home and raising them. And then, we like to think we were a great team and raised two great young men. But I also attribute that to what the Army gave us, and that was a life in a lot of different places.